It seemed like just another ordinary workday in the Senate, but what happened today will be talked about for a long time to come. In a hearing that appeared to revolve around policy debates on climate and the Green New Deal bill, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stunned the entire room when she suddenly launched a personal attack on Senator John Kennedy. She mocked his folksy Southern style, calling him a joke right in the middle of the live broadcast session. But what Kennedy responded with wasn't just a retort, it was a lesson in composure, sharpness, and quintessentially American wit. What happened next left the entire Senate and all of America unable to look away. The atmosphere in the Senate hearing room seemed to thicken with a silence, as if waiting for something to explode. Ocasio-Cortez took a few steps toward the podium, her voice ringing out sharp, decisive, and unrelenting. "Dear colleagues," she began, her eyes sweeping across the room before locking onto Senator John Kennedy, who sat quietly with his usual calm demeanor, arms crossed over his chest. "We are discussing the fate of this planet, about devastating storms, communities swept away, and the cost in lives that people are paying. Yet, it's hard to maintain seriousness when a senator in this room keeps turning the discussion into a comedy act with folksy phrases, as if he's standing at a Southern fair." She paused, her lips curling into a cold smirk, then pointed directly at him. "Senator Kennedy," she said, enunciating each word clearly. "In this critical discussion, you are a joke, and not the kind that makes people laugh." A few chuckles came from a group of younger senators who supported Ocasio-Cortez, but most of the audience merely exchanged glances, some furrowing their brows in clear disapproval of her personal attack. Reporters in the back rows began typing faster, sensing the scent of a sensational headline. The cameras, like impassive eyes, zoomed in on Kennedy's face, waiting for his reaction. But he remained seated, showing no sign of being rattled. His eyes, bright and sharp, met Ocasio-Cortez's directly, but his lips stayed closed, neither smiling nor frowning. His silence seemed to embolden her further. She continued, her tone now laced with more overt sarcasm. "You talk about economic costs, Senator Kennedy, but do you know the real price of inaction? Communities like mine in the Bronx, where people face flooding and pollution, don't need your farmer-style quips. They need action, vision, someone who actually understands the issue." She gestured emphatically, as if trying to etch her words into the minds of everyone in the room. "You may think you're clever with your folksy sayings, but on this issue, you're nothing more than a bystander failing to grasp the urgency of our time." Scattered applause rose from Ocasio-Cortez's allies, but not everyone was in. A neutral senator seated near the back of the room subtly shook their head, whispering something to the person beside them. An Ocasio-Cortez aide standing in the corner smiled with pride, but with a flicker of unease in her eyes, as if realizing that the attack was crossing the usual boundaries of political debate. Meanwhile, reporters began exchanging nods, sensing that this would be the moment defining the entire hearing. Ocasio-Cortez, feeling the room's attention, pressed her attack further. She took another step, her gaze fixed on Kennedy. "We need leaders who dare to think big, who dare to act, not people who just sit there cracking cheap jokes. Senator Kennedy, if you can't contribute anything beyond quips, maybe you should step aside for those who actually want to save this planet." Her words were like a final arrow, aimed straight at Kennedy's honor. She stood tall, her gaze defiant, waiting for him to crumble under the weight of her criticism. But the room remained silent, and Kennedy still didn't respond immediately. His silence was like a weapon, making Ocasio-Cortez, though still outwardly confident, begin to sense a hint of unease. When Kennedy finally spoke, his warm Southern drawl filled the room, unhurried, each word chosen carefully like stones placed precisely on a chessboard. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez," he began, his gaze locked on her unwavering. "I grew up in a small town where folks don't shout to prove they're right. I studied at the best schools not to boast, but to learn that words need weight, not just volume." He paused, letting his words sink into the room, which seemed to shrink under the force of his calm. A few conservative senators smiled discreetly, while neutral ones leaned forward, drawn in by how Kennedy turned a personal attack into a statement of principle. He continued, his voice steady but sharp like a blade hidden in velvet. "You talk about action, about saving the planet. I agree, need action. But action isn't expensive promises that regular folks end up paying for. I represent working people who don't have time for flashy dreams, but need solutions they can trust." Whispers rippled through the room. A reporter in the far corner scribbled quickly, sensing Kennedy was turning the tide. Ocasio-Cortez, unwilling to lose the upper hand, stood up immediately, hands on hips, her voice now tinged with urgency. "Senator Kennedy, you talk about working people, but do you really understand what they're going through when their homes are swept away by storms? When the air they breathe is full of smoke? They don't need clever words, they need bold policies, like the Green New Deal." She stepped forward, her eyes blazing, as if trying to overwhelm Kennedy with her sheer energy, but Kennedy didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze still calm, and responded with a faint smile, not mocking, but the confidence of someone who knows their worth. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I understand my people. They're the ones working from dawn to dusk who don't want to hear plans that sound nice but leave them in debt. If you want to talk policy, let's talk about how we pay for it instead of criticizing how I speak." His words, though gentle, cut sharply, earning nods from a few neutral senators while Ocasio-Cortez's supporters began exchanging anxious glances. The room's atmosphere was now like a furnace, with the clash between the two senators at its core. Ocasio-Cortez, sensing Kennedy was stealing the spotlight, decided to push harder. "You can talk about costs, but you're dodging the real issue," she fired back, her voice rising, hands gesturing for emphasis. "We can't wait any longer. Young people, communities like mine, are suffering right now. Do you think your folksy sayings can calm the storms out there?" She paused, her gaze defiant, waiting for Kennedy to buckle under the pressure. Kennedy merely shrugged, a gesture, almost casual but deeply calculated. He stood up for the first time in the hearing, and the room fell instantly silent. "You talk about storms, Miss Ocasio-Cortez," he said, his voice lower, as if telling a story. "I've seen storms in Louisiana where homes are swept away, where people lose everything. I'm not here to put on a show, but to ensure the solutions we offer don't bury those folks in more debt. If you want to call that folksy, go ahead. My people call it the truth." His words landed like a blow, quiet but powerful enough to shake the room. A few conservative senators clapped lightly, while Ocasio-Cortez's group grew quieter. A reporter in the back whispered. He just turned her attack to his advantage. The cameras, still fixed on Kennedy, captured him sitting down, his gaze locked on Ocasio-Cortez, as if daring her to continue. Ocasio-Cortez, though caught off guard, didn't back down. She stood tall, took a deep breath, and responded, "Senator, your truth is just a way to delay. The Green New Deal isn't a dream, it's a plan to save our future. If you can't keep up, maybe you should step aside for those who dare to act." She sat down, her eyes still on Kennedy, as if declaring this fight wasn't over, but Kennedy, with an almost supernatural calm, gave a slight smile, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. The room, still digesting his words, sensed he hadn't yet played his final card. Reporters typed faster, anticipating this clash wouldn't end here. An aide to a neutral senator whispered, "Kennedy's playing a long game." The Senate hearing room felt like a forge, each word a spark, heating the air. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, still standing tall after her sharp attack, sensed the room's focus. Her eyes flashed, not with doubt, but with determination to push her confrontation with John Kennedy to its peak. She knew this moment wasn't just a climate debate, but a chance to assert her standing before colleagues and the nation. The cameras, like unblinking eyes, tracked her every move, while reporters in the back scribbled, predicting a headline that would set social media ablaze. Ocasio-Cortez took a deep breath, her dark hair tied tightly, swaying slightly as she leaned forward. Her voice, now lower but sharp as a blade, cut through the silence. "Senator Kennedy," she said, hands clasped, fingers tapping the podium as if restraining emotion. "You talk about working people, but do you truly hear their voices? When storms sweep through the small towns you represent, when people lose their homes, they don't need fancy words about practical solutions, they need a bold plan. A vision like the Green New Deal, not hesitation disguised with rural quips." She emphasized rural with a touch of sarcasm, her gaze fixed on Kennedy as the tension in the room reached its peak. The room stirred with scattered applause from AOC's supporters, but it was quickly drowned out by the silence of the neutrals. A conservative senator near Kennedy shook his head, clearly displeased with her relentless personal attacks. A young aide in the corner, wearing AOC's badge, bit her lip, her eyes wavering between pride and worry. A reporter from a major newspaper, pen in hand, jotted down notes with a subtle smile, knowing the phrase would be quoted everywhere. The cameras stayed on Kennedy, waiting for his response to this new wave of attacks, but Kennedy, like a rock in a rushing stream, remained outwardly unmoved. He sat there, hands clasped, his eyes glinting with subtle mischief. He didn't stand, didn't rush to reply, but leaned slightly as if weighing each word AOC had spoken. His composure only fueled AOC's resolve. She stepped to the side, her voice now brimming with energy, like an actor reaching a play's climax. "We're in the 21st century," she declared, hands sweeping upward, pointing to the ceiling as if underscoring urgency. "We can't let outdated thinking block progress. You may represent Louisiana, but you're abandoning young people demanding a cleaner, sustainable future. Don't you see, Senator? Or are you too busy with quips to hide your lack of vision?" Her words were like a flaming arrow aimed straight at Kennedy's honor. A few cheers rose from the progressive group, but not all were enthusiastic. A neutral senator seated in the middle of the room let out a soft sigh, their gaze shifting between AOC and Kennedy, as if wondering where this confrontation would lead. A reporter, tablet in hand, began drafting a story, sensing that AOC had just pushed things beyond the bounds of a policy debate. But AOC, feeling the room's attention, didn't stop. "I'm here for the community's suffering," she continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "People who don't have time for empty platitudes. If you can't contribute, Senator Kennedy, please let those who dare to dream big do their work." Kennedy, for the first time, raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture but enough to signal to close observers that he was preparing to respond. He didn't stand, but when his voice rang out, it carried a quiet strength, like a still breeze before a storm. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez," he said, each word delivered with astonishing calm, "I'm not here to argue who dreams bigger. I'm here to ensure those dreams don't become burdens for the people you talk about. Storms, I've seen them. Walked through devastated towns. Folks don't need costly promises. They need plans that can work without costing them everything." His words, though soft, were like a stone dropped into a still lake, sending ripples across the room. A few senators nodded, especially those from rural states, sensing the sincerity in Kennedy's voice. AOC, however, refused to back down. She stood up immediately, her eyes blazing. "Senator, you call that realism, but I call it evasion," she fired back, her voice rising, almost trembling with anger. "People don't need excuses. They need us to act now. If you can't keep up with the times, don't stand in our way." She sat down, her gaze still fixed on Kennedy, as if declaring she still held the upper hand. Kennedy, with his quiet confidence, gave a faint smile, not mocking, but that of someone playing a long game. He leaned forward, hands clasped, and spoke, his voice steady but sharp. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I'm not evading. I just want to ensure what we promise the people we can deliver. If that's backward in your eyes, I'm fine with the label." His words drew nods from a few conservative senators, while AOC's group began whispering. Sensing Kennedy was steadily regaining ground, the room now felt like an arena, with AOC and Kennedy at opposite ends, neither yielding. Reporters, sensing the heat of the clash, began sending draft stories to their editors, predicting this moment would flood social media. An aide to a neutral senator whispered, "She's backing him into a corner, but Kennedy hasn't thrown his final punch." The tension was like a taut string about to snap, and everyone knew this confrontation was only beginning to escalate. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had just sat down, her eyes still burning, challenging John Kennedy after her relentless attacks. She believed she had the upper hand, but her sharp words about Kennedy's backwardness and hesitation had put him on the defensive. Her allies, though still clapping, began exchanging worried glances, sensing that Kennedy, with his calculated silence, was preparing a counterstrike. Reporters, pens racing across paper, felt the rhythm of the hearing shift, like a ship changing course in a storm. The cameras, fixed on Kennedy, captured every small detail, the way he cleared his throat, the glint of light on his glasses, and his hands, now open, resting lightly on the table, like a player ready to make their final move. Kennedy stood for the first time in the hearing, and the action made the room seem to hold its breath. He wasn't rushed, showed no anger, but slowly adjusted his tie, his gaze sweeping over the senators before settling on AOC. His calm, like a deep river, made AOC's earlier attacks seem like meaningless ripples. When he spoke, his warm southern drawl filled the air, not loud, but each syllable carved into the space. "Miss Ocasio-Cortez," he began, his eyes fixed on her, "I'm not here to compete over who speaks louder or who has prettier dreams. I'm here to talk about what truly matters to the American people, not flashy promises, but solutions they can rely on." The room fell into an eerie silence, as if everyone was drawn into the pool of his words. A neutral senator in the middle row leaned forward, their eyes glinting with curiosity. An AOC aide in the corner stopped texting, Sensing Kennedy was shifting the tides, he continued, his voice now carrying a hint of sharpness but still laced with sincerity. You talk about storms, floods, suffering communities. I've walked through waterlogged roads in Louisiana, talked to people who lost homes, livelihoods. They don't need us painting grand visions that leave them in debt. They need us to listen, need plans that don't just sound good on paper but can actually work. His words were like a cool breeze through the room, easing the heat of the clash. A few conservative senators began nodding, their eyes shining with approval. Even some of AOC's allies, though loyal, couldn't deny the weight of Kennedy's argument. AOC, seated across, gripped her hands tightly, her eyes now tit. With her knees though she tried to maintain her confidence, she opened her mouth as if to counter, but Kennedy, with the finesse of a seasoned chess player, didn't let her interrupt. He raised a hand, a gentle but commanding gesture, and continued. You call me backward, he said, his voice now lower, like a storyteller guiding the audience to a climax. But backward isn't when you talk about what people need instead of what they want to hear. I'm not here to put on a show, Miss Ocasio-Cortez. I'm here to ensure every tax dollar is used wisely, that every policy we pass doesn't push folks into hardship. If that makes me folksy, I'll take it, because at least I know I'm standing on the side of truth. The room erupted in unexpected applause, not just from conservative senators, but also from a few neutrals swayed by Kennedy's sincerity. AOC, for the first time, seemed to lose her usual confidence. She sat upright, her gaze wavering as if searching for a way to regain control. A reporter near the exit whispered to a colleague. He just turned the tables. This is Kennedy's moment. The cameras, still locked on him, captured every detail. The faint smile on his lips, the bright but unarrogant eyes, and the way he sat down as if knowing he'd delivered a decisive blow. But AOC wasn't one to give up easily. She stood, her eyes now carrying a hint of anger but her voice striving for calm. Senador Kennedy, she said, pointing at him. You talk about truth, but the truth is you're obstructing progress. The Green New Deal isn't a dream. It's the only path to save this planet. You can talk about costs, but the price of delay is the lives of millions. She paused, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, and the room fell silent again. But this time, the silence no longer tilted in her favor. Her words, though passionate, seemed to lack the strength they held before Kennedy's composure. Kennedy, not standing again, merely tilted his head, his gaze still locked on AOC. He spoke, his voice low and steady. Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I'm not obstructing progress. I just want progress that doesn't leave working people behind. If you call that delay, I call it responsibility. A few senators clapped, not loudly, but enough to make AOC realize she was losing control. The room now felt like a chessboard, with Kennedy holding the advantage. A reporter, tablet in hand, began sending drafts to their newsroom, predicting this clip would flood social media. An aide to a neutral senator whispered, Kennedy just taught the room a lesson. AOC, though maintaining a tough exterior, didn't respond immediately. She sat down, her eyes scanning her allies as if searching for a way to regain ground. The room and the cameras now belonged to Kennedy. This confrontation, with Kennedy's decisive blow, had completely shifted the hearing's rhythm. Reporters typed faster, sensing this wasn't just a debate but an event that would shape public opinion. A conservative senator near Kennedy patted his shoulder, eyes gleaming with approval. Meanwhile, AOC, though unyielding, seemed to realize she had underestimated her opponent. The Senate chamber, after John Kennedy's decisive strike, felt as if it had weathered a silent earthquake. His words, sharp yet calm, still echoed in the air, drawing every eye to him. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, seated across, tried to maintain her tough facade, but her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the table. Her gaze darted to her allies as if seeking an anchor. The room, once ablaze with her attacks, now seemed to tilt toward Kennedy, not due to thunderous applause, but the reverent silence that enveloped it. The cameras, like motionless witnesses, captured every moment, from Kennedy's piercing eyes to the fleeting unease on AOC's face. Reporters, pens racing across paper, sensed the hearing had just witnessed an irreversible turning point. A neutral senator in the middle row cleared their throat, breaking the silence. The small sound acted like a signal, prompting colleagues to exchange glances. One of them, with silver hair, leaned over and whispered to an aide, Kennedy just turned an attack into a lesson. Though quiet, these words spread quickly among the neutrals, sparking a wave of tacit agreement. A conservative senator near Kennedy placed a hand on his shoulder, eyes shining with approval. as if to say he'd done what few expected. Meanwhile, AOC's supporters, though loyal, began whispering, their eyes wavering between disappointment and determination to regain ground. AOC, sensing the shift in the air, stood again, but this time her voice lacked its earlier edge. She took a deep breath, trying to reclaim her confidence. "I respect Senator Kennedy's views," she said, her tone lower but still tinged with defiance. "But I'm here for those who are suffering. We can't delay any longer. I hope you'll consider what young people are demanding." Her words, though emotional, lacked the force of her earlier attacks. A few allies clapped, but the sound was feeble, like a dying flame. A reporter in the corner jotted down delay with a subtle smile, knowing it wasn't enough to turn the tide. Kennedy, not responding immediately, gave a slight nod, a small but meaningful gesture, as if acknowledging AOC's effort but remaining unshaken. He sat down, hands clasped, eyes still sharp, like someone who knew the battle was far from over but was confident in his position, who had just played a perfect move in a chess game. His silence, rather than diminishing his impact, made his earlier words resonate deeper. An aide to a neutral senator whispered to a colleague at the exit. She tried, but Kennedy won this round. The cameras, still fixed, captured the moment, the contrast between Kennedy's calm and AOC's final effort. The atmosphere in the room was now like a still painting, with everyone processing what had just happened. A progressive senator near AOC gently touched her arm, their eyes offering comfort, as if to say she still had their support. But even they couldn't deny that Kennedy had shifted how the room perceived him. A veteran reporter with graying hair began drafting a story, predicting this moment would flood social media, not for AOC's dramatics, but for Kennedy's poise. A camera panning slowly captured the neutral senators, now leaning toward Kennedy, their eyes deep in thought. A technician in the corner adjusted a microphone, creating a tiny sound but enough to startle everyone. That small noise was like a period, closing the confrontation in the chamber. Reporters typed faster, sending stories to their newsrooms with headlines like "Kennedy turns the tables on AOC" or "Historic Senate Showdown." A young aide wearing AOC's badge bowed their head, frantically texting, likely reporting the situation to her team. Meanwhile, Kennedy, still seated, gave a slight smile to a colleague, his eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction but not arrogance. The initial tension had given way to a subtle respect, not just for Kennedy, but for how he turned a personal attack into a lesson on responsibility. A neutral senator standing to get water whispered to a colleague, "This is why he's always underestimated. He doesn't need to shout to win." Though quiet, these words spread quickly through the room, like an affirmation of Kennedy's silent victory. Just minutes after the hearing ended, a 3-minute clip capturing Kennedy's composed response to AOC's attacks was posted on Twitter by a freelance reporter. The simple but sensational headline, "Kennedy silences AOC in climate debates," racked up millions of views within an hour, sparking a storm of comments, shares, and hashtags that set the online space ablaze. One user wrote, "Kennedy just showed the world you don't need to yell to win," alongside a meme of Kennedy as a boxer captioned "knockout by composure." Meanwhile, TikTok exploded with a teenager in Texas, mimicking Kennedy's southern drawl, recreated his closing line with dramatic background music, garnering hundreds of thousands of likes. A group of college students staged the entire debate, with one playing AOC in a defiant pose and another as Kennedy with a sly smile, pushing the video to trending status. Even Instagram, typically less focused on politics, was flooded with posts featuring Kennedy's quotes designed over artistic backgrounds, like "Listening, not shouting, is strength." But not everyone sided with Kennedy. AOC's supporters, especially young people and progressives, pushed back fiercely. A Twitter account with millions of followers wrote, "AOC spoke the truth about climate, and Kennedy just dodged with sappy one-liners." A YouTube video by an environmental activist defended AOC, arguing she was fighting for the future while Kennedy represented delay tactics. These posts also drew thousands of shares, creating an online battleground between the two sides, each trying to shape the narrative in their favor. This polarization wasn't confined to social media. Major news outlets quickly jumped in, making the confrontation the centerpiece of evening broadcasts. CNN ran a lengthy analysis titled "AOC's Passion Meets Kennedy's Calm, A Clash of Generations," noting that AOC, though fervent, lost points with neutral viewers by launching personal attacks. A CNN commentator remarked AOC aimed to show strength, but Kennedy made her look impatient. Meanwhile, Fox News hailed Kennedy as an emblem of composure, with an article titled "Kennedy Teaches AOC a Lesson in Dignity," portraying him as a defender of traditional values standing firm against overzealous progressivism. Independent outlets like The Hill and Politico took a more neutral stance, analyzing the event's deeper implications. A Politico article titled "Clash in the Senate, a Mirror of America's Divide," argued that the confrontation reflected generational and regional divides. With AOC representing young urbanites and Kennedy conservative rural areas, it quoted a political analyst. Kennedy leveraged AOC's attacks to solidify his image as a champion of working people. AOC, conversely, needs to learn to balance passion with strategy. The cultural impact of the event extended beyond politics. Online forums from Reddit to Facebook overflowed with discussions about how Kennedy represented those underestimated for their accent or background. A Reddit post with thousands of upvotes shared a story of a Southerner mocked for their voice, calling Kennedy a hero for the overlooked. Meanwhile, environmental groups, while backing AOC, acknowledged she needed to adjust her approach to appeal to moderate voters. A young activist in an Instagram post wrote, "AOC is our voice, but we need to be more strategic to beat people like Kennedy." The event also highlighted the media's role in shaping public opinion. Some analysts criticized outlets for hyping the drama instead of focusing on climate issues. An article on an independent news site remarked, "While AOC and Kennedy sparred, the real question how to save the planet was forgotten." Despite the criticism, networks kept capitalizing on the incident, with talk shows inviting experts to dissect every detail of the clash. The media storm surrounding the confrontation between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and John Kennedy gradually subsided, but the ripples it left behind continued to spread, etching themselves into the minds of Americans. From the solemn Senate chamber to the lively comment threads on social media, this moment was not just a climate debate but a mirror reflecting the divisions, passions, and hopes of a nation seeking direction. As the viral clip amassed millions of views, it became a symbol not only of two individuals clashing but of the values they represented. Now, with the spotlight dimmed, what remains are profound lessons not just for AOC and Kennedy but for all who witnessed it. This confrontation, with AOC's sharp attacks and Kennedy's poise, showed that politics is not only a battle of ideas but also of how we convey them. AOC, with her fiery passion and thirst for change, reminded everyone of the urgency of action, but her choice to challenge Kennedy with personal jabs, calling him a joke, and mocking his Southern style cost her sympathy from neutral viewers. In contrast, Kennedy, with his calm and incisive arguments, proved that strength lies not in volume but in sincerity and connection. He not only defended his honor but inspired those who've been underestimated for their background or demeanor. It's a reminder that in a divided world, how we dialogue matters as much as what we say. A Reddit user in a post garnering thousands of upvotes wrote, "Kennedy and AOC both want good things, but how they showed it shaped how we see them." This simple yet profound comment reflects a truth. Politics, like life, demands a balance between passion and respect. AOC may remain a standard-bearer for the young, but she needs to learn to build bridges rather than burn them. Kennedy, with his quiet victories, solidified his image, but he too faces a challenge, ensuring his traditional values aren't seen as barriers to progress. The story of the clash between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and John Kennedy in the Senate hearing on climate reform deeply reflects the divisions and challenges in today's American society, where generations, regions, and ideologies often collide. Our work, with her blazing passion and sharp words, represents a young generation craving swift change. But her attack on Kennedy, calling him a joke and mocking his Southern style, revealed a misstep, underestimating her opponent and letting emotion override strategy. Conversely, Kennedy, with his composure and focus on responsibility to workers, turned a personal attack into an opportunity to affirm his values, earning respect from colleagues and the public. This confrontation, amplified across social media with hashtags, shows how modern media magnifies every moment, turning a debate into a cultural phenomenon. The lesson from this story is that in a polarized society like the US, respect and listening are key to overcoming prejudice and building bridges. AOC may inspire the youth, but she needs to learn to dialogue rather than attack, as Kennedy did. By emphasizing practical solutions instead of retaliating with insults, each of us, whether in an office, classroom, or on social media, can apply this lesson. Instead of judging others by their voice, background, or beliefs, listen, and find common ground. In a diverse nation like the US, only sincere dialogue can help us progress together. As Kennedy turned a tense moment into a lesson in dignity and responsibility, this confrontation serves as a reminder that politics, at its best, is not just about winning arguments, but about fostering understanding and unity. Thank you for following the dramatic journey between AOC and Kennedy. Hit the subscribe button to not miss other gripping political stories. See you in the next video where we continue exploring profound lessons from America.